Hey y'all, Rob here with ATX Legal, and here's the next part of the 2023 Travis County DWI Guide. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about felony DWIs. Now, obviously, felony DWIs are more serious. They're treated more seriously by the courts, by the prosecutors, by myself, and they should be treated more seriously by anyone charged with a felony as well. Now, I mentioned this in the guide and in several other points, but it bears repeating here. This is not legal advice. It is not a substitute for hiring an attorney. If you are charged with a felony DWI, I would suggest talking to a few attorneys immediately, getting some consultations, and talking about the specific facts of your case. Now, we'll first talk about what makes it a felony DWI, and the most common way is if you've had 2 previous DWI convictions. Note, I don't say 2 previous arrests or charges, I'm talking about convictions. So that would have been all the way through to the conviction process where you pled guilty, got a guilty plea on your record, and that happened twice before, and then you were arrested again. If that happened twice and you were arrested a third time, it's automatically going to be enhanced to a felony. And that's a 3rd-degree felony with up to 10 years jail time. And one thing to note here, the actual severity of the details of the 3rd DWI don't matter very much. So imagine a situation where you're barely over .08, you maybe were speeding by 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, you get pulled over, and you get charged with the DWI. That's considered a minor DWI if it's your first one. Oftentimes I can get that case dismissed or reduced to a lesser charge. But if you have those 2 previous convictions, it's automatically enhanced. There's really nothing your attorney can do about it at that stage. You might be able to get it reduced down to a misdemeanor later, but you're still looking at a felony arrest that's going to be on your record. Another way a DWI can be a felony, it can be your first DWI, but if there's a child in the car, that's going to be automatically enhanced to a felony. I don't see that a ton, but it does happen, and it's something to be aware of. Another way DWIs are enhanced is if there is a serious injury. So if there's a collision and someone is either seriously injured or if they die, that's going to be intoxication assault or intoxication manslaughter. Intoxication assault is a 3rd-degree felony. Intoxication manslaughter is a 2nd-degree felony. Of course, these are very serious, and if you have been charged, call an attorney immediately, schedule a consultation. Now let's talk about bond and conditions of bond. Now, first of all, PR bonds are going to be much less likely in felony DWIs. They do happen, usually with the assistance of an attorney, but oftentimes a judge is going to deny a PR bond, and they can set your bond at really any amount, but the amounts I see are usually between $5,000 and $20,000, can be higher, 30 or 40,000. And if you have to go through a bondsman, just do the math. That's 10% on each of those. So if it's $5,000, a surety bond is going to be about $500. If it's $20,000, a surety bond is going to be about $2,000. And oftentimes you are going to have to go through a surety if you want to be released on a felony DWI. The judge is going to put conditions on your release. It is going to include an IID. Sometimes it's going to include a scram device. I talk about those devices elsewhere in the guide, but just know that the judge is going to put conditions on your release. He's not going to just say, leave the jail. You're going to have to follow those conditions or you will be revoked. If you're revoked, you're going to be right back in jail waiting for your trial, sometimes until your case is resolved. Now let's talk about plea negotiations for felony DWIs, and the big difference here is the starting point. If I'm starting at a misdemeanor, then I'm trying to get that misdemeanor dismissed or reduced to a lower charge. When I'm starting at the felony level, maybe I'm just trying to get it reduced down to a misdemeanor conviction. Also, the prosecutor is more likely to recommend jail time, and there's something really bad you want to avoid called Safe P. You might have heard of it. It's an inpatient program in the jail. It's 4 to 6 months. It's supposed to be way worse than regular jail. I have not gone through it, but I've heard stories that it is worse than regular jail. You want to avoid it at all costs. And while it's not specific to felony DWIs, it just doesn't happen with misdemeanors that often. So I put it in the felony category because anytime there is a felony DWI, Safe P is going to be one of those things that's on the table. We can't always avoid it, but it is something to try to avoid if possible. Now, to avoid Safe P, we might offer some other options, which might seem bad, but I promise you Safe P is worse. And these options could include inpatient care, something like a 30-day private program, or intensive outpatient where you're going and seeing a therapist once or twice a week for a couple hours, 3 hours. And yes, that can be a burden on your life, but you're trying to avoid this much more difficult burden by avoiding Safe P. Of course, you definitely want to avoid a felony conviction, especially if you don't have a felony on your record. Sometimes that is possible. We can get it reduced down to a misdemeanor. And if we can do that, we want to make that happen. And if you're watching this video and you have been charged with a felony DWI, I just want to make a quick note about mental health. You know, anybody can make that mistake and go out and drive after they've had a little bit to drink and pick up a misdemeanor DWI. But if it's at the point where you've had 2, 3, and you keep getting DWIs, you should really think about the effect that alcohol is having. You know, usually I look at these classes and things in therapy that I put my clients into as kind of a way to make the legal case go a little quicker, more smoothly. But there are times when you really do need that help and you need to take a hard look at your own life. So that's something to consider if you are facing felony DWIs. I do see addiction in my practice, and alcohol is a hell of an addiction. Don't be afraid to get help. Talk to your family, friends, talk to strangers on the internet if that helps you. There are other people who have been through this and they can help you with their lessons and their experience. Each felony DWI is different. That is why it's hard to give a general guide about felony DWIs. If you have a felony DWI, go ahead and call an attorney. None of this is legal advice. It's there to help, but it's not legal advice for your specific case. If you do need legal advice, visit us at atx.legal.